So let's start this with our brand new Scratch project. We're going to go ahead here and give it a name. So that's done in the top corner. For this one, put your name in. I'm calling this one Chase the Jewel. Now we don't need our Scratch cat here, okay, so we can just delete that one. And for this one, we'll be doing a different Scratch, a different sprite. But go ahead and find yourself a nice background. Okay, a lot of these will work for what this game is. I'm going to go with the mountain. And I'm going to select a sprite. Now it could be whatever. What I'm going to do is the crystal. And we'll put it here in the middle. The cool thing about the crystal is it's got a different costume. It's got an alternative. This purple jewel that I like. That's what I'm going to use. I want it a little bit bigger, so I'm going to up the size to 250. Perfect. Like any piece of work, when we get the opportunity, click Save Now. So let's go ahead and put some code into this. Let's start with an event, real basic one when the flag is clicked. What we want it to do is to go to a random position. So let's take that one, go to random position. So anytime this is clicked, that's just going to move around. Pretty cool. Now I also want to make sure, because I'm not using the first costume here, Crystal A, I'm using Crystal B, so I want to make sure that that's what's going to come up each time I select it. So when the flag is pushed, it's always going to switch to Crystal B. Now to show you what would happen if I push this button, it would change and move to a random position. I want it to go to Crystal B every time, just in case it's on a different one. Now this isn't much of a game just here, so we've got to add some different variables to make this into what it's going to become. So I'm going to add control, if, and what I want to be happening is I want it to be touching the mouse pointer. So sensing, touching mouse pointer, and I can slot that into that gap. If touching a mouse pointer, I also want it to go to a random position. But that's all fair and well, but that's not touching at the moment. So what we need this to do is to be forever, because we want it to always do this, and slot that in there. So just the same here. Now anytime it's touching the mouse pointer, it will move. Perfect. Now to make this a little bit more interesting, let's add a sound. So we're going to start the sound when it's touching it. Excellent. Exactly what we want it to start doing. But once again, there's no scoring system. There's no way to tell if this is actually a success, if we're playing the game, if we're likely to play it again. If we just start shooting our mouse around, well, we're going to get bored pretty quickly. So this is the point where we add a variable in score. Okay, we make that variable. I'll call it score. You could call it something else if you want. And when we start, when we click the flag, we want to set the score to 0. Then each time we get to touching this with the mouse pointer, we want that score to go up by 1. So now we've got something to go by. We've got some sort of measurement for how successful our playing of the game is. Now to have this counting any sort of time factor to see if we can do this in a certain amount of time, we can use the timer function that comes in sensing. And you can just click that, and it will just keep counting up. You can reset the timer, but it doesn't really allow us a lot of options here. So I'm not a big fan of that one. What I prefer to do is put in its own variable. We'll call this time. That'll show up here, and the difference here is we can make it do whatever we want it to do. So I'm going to go ahead and do a new event. Same again, it will be when this is clicked. We're going to set the time to 0. and then we're going to wait for a certain amount of time before we change the variable by 1. And we can put that on repeat, just forever. That can go in between those two, so that when we click it, time just starts to click up. And that's a good way of setting a stop all once the time reaches, say, 30 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever we want it to reach. So I want my game to use hundredths of a second, so I'm going to go 0.01 seconds. We wait for that long and it changes it by 0.01. So when the flag is clicked, it's showing hundredths of a second. And you can go further than that if you really want to as well, if you really want to get down to the decimal points. But I want you to have a final score. I want this to stop once you've reached the score of something I choose. In this case, I'm going to go to 30. So what we want is to have code in here that says if the score gets to 30, we're going to stop everything. We're going to stop all the scripts. So let's get that in there. So we're going to use if again. That's going to go underneath the current if we've got there. First time for this code we'll be using operators. We could go equals 30, but I'm going to go with greater than 29 because sometimes we double up on things. And this is basing it on the score. So we're going to go back to our variable and drag this score. So if our score is over 29, then what we want to do is stop all. And the moment it gets to 30, game stops. Exactly what we wanted it to do. So there's the Chase the Jewel game. See what you can make of it. Maybe you choose to do different scores, and maybe you have a countdown timer. Maybe you have a completely different item that you're chasing. Maybe you start to make some clones and make it a lot more challenging in terms of finding different items to collect. Maybe they're worth different scores. That's for you to decide and for you to make. Have fun.